It's not a merger. It's a straight up acquisition. Compass Anywhere acquisition, merger, deal, whatever we want to call it, 1 week after the announcement last Monday. Compass will own close to 80% of the company after the deal is closed. So therefore, it's a buyout or a straight acquisition. What really are the issues beyond consolidation and just building a bigger brokerage, right? Is it really just about having 340 some odd thousand agents and, having world dominance? Yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it, but I think it goes much, much deeper than that. Because in the current world, in the current marketplace, we all know the obvious things. Technology influences everything. AI influences everything. What's happening in every other industry, right? People are getting laid off. Certain things are more efficient. Many things are more efficient, but people are getting laid off. When we talk about commissions, something very important in the real estate industry, it would only make sense that commissions are under pressure from technology as well as from consolidation and something like this. So these are the kind of things I want to talk about. The Real Deal, which is an insider publication on real estate, wrote an article, I've got the title here, Compass Anywhere, first play in a long game to bring commission splits down. All right, so the split is between the agent and the brokerage house. The first play in a long game, what does that mean? So in every real estate transaction, there's obviously a buy side and a sell side. But as far as commissions go, it's the brokerage house and the agent. And in a typical transaction, there are two brokers, one on each side, and two agents, one on each side. An agent splits their commission with the brokerage house. Now, a new agent might split 75 to the house. An experienced agent in demand might keep 95%, could keep 100% if you're being recruited, right? But what we're focusing on here is the split. Let's call it typical split 80-20. So what this article points out is the underlying motive really may not be as much about world dominance as it is about being able to control a marketplace and then pay your agents a lower split. And I think that's a very shrewd point made by the Real Deal. So to get into this a little more, we have to talk about something called clear cooperation and private listings. So clear cooperation is a policy that was put into place by the National Association of Realtors, the NAR. It is administered and enforced by the local multiple listing service, known as the MLS. And then the brokers and agents have to adhere to it. And what the clear cooperation policy says is if you do any sort of public marketing, and just consider that to be a very broad definition for the argument, if you do any sort of public marketing, you have to put it on the MLS within 1 day. And if you don't, you're in violation of the policy. So what happens when you put it on the MLS? It gets syndicated. So it goes to partner MLSs. So if you're in Northern California, you might partner with Southern California to have access, these sorts of things. But syndication really, where it gets important, is to Zillow, Redfin, and the others. And that's the crux of the Compass Zillow fight, but we'll come back to that, I hope. So clear cooperation. You have to put it on the MLS, get it out to Zillow, and then the whole world can see your listing. And it makes sense from a consumer preference, a general consumer preference standpoint, because the more people that have access to the listing, the more eyes in it, the more chance of getting the best buyers and finding the market clearing price, the right price. I believe that. Now, Compass has put forth, and since very recently, Douglas Elliman has come up with their own as well, but Compass started this fight with what they call private listings. In other words, come to Compass, we'll keep it in our closed network, and we'll get you the best price because we're better at A, B, C, D, and E. And it's a closed system. Logic says that's not better for most transactions. There may be some specialty cases. I don't know, take 10%. I don't know what the actual number would be, but specialty cases. Or a consumer chooses to keep it off market or in a private listing, right? Even if it's 20% total. I'm going to argue for 80% at least. Full transparency is best. So, private listings. So Compass and Zillow got into a fight, many iterations over this, job owning, lawsuits, where Zillow started banning listings that first went private. Right? If they didn't come up in accordance with clear cooperation and be put on within one day, if you came in a week, Zillow said, So these two guys, Zillow and Compass, start fighting with one another. Private listings. All right, put that aside for a second. So you gain market share. You become the largest in the country, right? Compass buys anywhere. The brands, it's Compass, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, ERA Real Estate, Better Homes and Gardens, Sotheby's, Christie's, and of course, Anywhere. Oh, and Corcoran, New York-based folks, Corcoran. So largest brokerage in the country. Number one, Compass, is buying number two, Anywhere. Market share, consolidation. Typically, you're going to have judicial review, or I should say Justice Department, DOJ, that sort of thing review. Even if it's just a ploy to get private listings and dominance, think about the damage that will be done here. We'll end up in the next phase, I don't know if it's a year or 5 years, where you have competing private networks. You could have the Compass Anywhere network, you could have the Douglas Elliman network, you could have the MLSs, whatever it might be. But as a consumer, you would have to check each of them, or just trust that if you go with, say, Compass, that they're giving you the best price, the best service. And how would you ever know without full transparency? Look at it another way. Let's say that Procter & Gamble makes the best laundry detergent. And Procter & Gamble decides you can only buy it from our stores, our select list of stores. How does that help the marketplace? It doesn't. In other words, you'd go to Amazon, and if the best product was the other detergent, Amazon couldn't stock it, so you couldn't get it there. Right? It's just illogical to think that private listings for the vast majority of transactions make sense. We've talked about the lawsuits, we've talked about clear cooperation, and we've talked about private markets. So now let's talk about the practical implications for agents. I'm in Los Angeles, all right? A lot of high-end properties, a lot of mid, a lot of low. It's a big area, right? But what happens when you have redundancies? For example, if Christie's has an office in Beverly Hills, and so does Sotheby's, and so does Compass, and so do 2 or 3 of the other brands, are you going to keep them all open? No. The first rule of mergers and acquisitions is cut costs. So you're not going to pay rent on multiple properties. Why would you? So you're going to close an office. All right. It also means you're going to fire the staff that were in the 3 different offices in the location. So people are going to get laid off. Maybe you start running 3 different brands out of the same building. People get laid off. That's what a merger does. You got to cut costs. And in this case, where it's an all-stock deal, right? Compass, they swap stock. Compass ends up with 78% of the company, I guess, depending on the numbers, and they take on a bunch of debt. I believe it's $2 billion plus. So you've got to service that debt, right? Which means you have to rationalize. You have to squeeze expenses. So it'll come out of physical plant, property and equipment, right? The office. It's also going to come out of staff. Then think about if we have these private networks, the listing for the house. And I don't care if it's $1 million home or a $10 million home or a $50 million home. It's in the network. So what's to stop Compass from saying one of our agents brought the listing into the network and an agent from inside the Compass network brings the buyer? What's to stop Compass from saying, we want to squeeze commissions here? Or if you're a Compass agent, which is probably the easiest one for them to get to because of the rules on how commissions are paid, buy side paying their own, sell side paying their own. So let's say it's a Compass agent and you have an agreement within the firm, you've got a contract within the firm where typically, let's say you're going to get 2.5% in Los Angeles. You represent the buyer, but you're under pressure in-house and they say, no, this is a 1% transaction to you, unless, of course, Your buyer wants to make up the rest. Okay, there's that piece. And then there's also the split. So even assume it was full commission for Los Angeles and call it 2.5 each side. The split between Compass Anywhere agent and the house. So again, for our example, let's just use 80-20. What if Compass imposes a policy and they say, look, if it's for a private listing, that split is now 65-35. We did the hard work and the hustle. The firm put up the network and the technology and the marketing and all of that. You're our agent. You want to participate in this transaction. The house is keeping more. That sort of thing will happen. It's just fear and greed and running a business. It's the basics. With the backdrop being an M&A, a merger and acquisition, where costs have to be cut. Things have to be rationalized. So to kind of sum things up, transparency is what's most important in any marketplace. Think of the New York Stock Exchange. You know from most transactions what the prices are. They're posted publicly. Now there are private markets and they're primarily institutional driven or for liquid trades, but for the most part, everything is public. That's transparency. Once you start segmenting and chopping things up, you give power to, let's call them oligopolies, right? The big players within an industry. We use monopoly loosely, but it really is oligopolistic competition when you end up with a handful of large brokers controlling things. So it will not be better for the industry. Yet the management teams of Compass and Anywhere will scream until they're blue in the face about how the consumer is going to benefit from all their new policies. Marginal benefits? Okay, great. It's true. Do a good job with service. Do a good job bringing a contractor, in as part of your transaction. Absolutely. But don't take us for fools and say that consolidation is going to lead to a better, cleaner marketplace. No. It may give the consolidator, the larger company, an advantage. That's fine. That's business. But if we want a free market and a transparent market, then you can't have what Compass Anywhere are doing or what Zillow is doing, right? Zillow would get syndicated leads from the MLSs that they may or may not pay for or pay the appropriate price for. And what would happen is XYZ house, say your house that's for sale with me as your broker. It pops up on Zillow and you don't see my name representing you. So if somebody clicks on that and wants information, instead of calling me, there's a space on the Zillow ad on the site that Zillow has sold to an agent. So that agent gets placed on the listing. So if you want information, someone wants information, they click that, they get that person, right? So it's a source of revenue for Zillow and leads. The only way you get to me is by having that agent call me, or if you dig deep into the Zillow property, they do list in small print my name, the MLS, the number, and they moved it a bit more prominently, but that's not the business model. What Zillow has done isn't right either. It's a bad business practice. And much of this has to do with the regulatory framework, which although it's housing and you have fair housing and those rules, the industry trade group, let me underline that, an industry trade group that advocates for the industry, right? Congress lobbies and all of that, sets rules, but it doesn't really have teeth. So it's an industry that, many people are going to push back on this, but it is under-regulated in terms of agent and broker conduct and standards of fair play. And I posit that as you break the industry into an oligopoly, you break it and consolidate it into an oligopoly, things will get worse rather than better. And I say that from the standpoint of the consumer, as well as brokers and agents working for those firms. Now, so as not to sound trite, let's face it, agents and brokers, commissions are coming down. Technology's pushing that. And we can get to that perhaps next week. But like anything else, like buying a car, you can go to the Chevy dealership, you can go to CarMax, you can order it online. Same thing in real estate. So this is just how the industry is moving. This is 2025, and this is where we are. So again, this has been a review of the Compass Anywhere transaction deal. I won't call it a merger because it's not. 1 week post the announcement,